What's up, everyone? This is Mike Gervais, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. A couple weeks ago, I interviewed Michael Gervais with the Seahawks, and about midway through our conversation, he started talking about something called brain mapping. And he explained it very briefly, but he said if you want to dive deeper into the subject, you need to contact Leslie Sherlin. So that's exactly what I did. And this week's show is with Dr. Leslie Sherlin. We talk about brain mapping. We talk about different brain waves and how they relate to performance. And most importantly, how he is able to control and help his high-end athletes perform better and gain control better over their mind. He gives practical things that don't require fancy headsets, such as breathing techniques, visualization techniques, etc. We also talk about sleep, its impact on your recovery and performance, and his app called Sleep Sense and the kind of the science around that. And we finish it up with some productivity talk. He is a highly successful entrepreneur, scientist, etc. And I ask him how he does it all. So tons of gems in this one. This guy is just an absolute genius. I know you're going to love the show. If you have time and you love our podcast, please go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. Give us some feedback. I appreciate it. Enjoy the show. What's up, guys? This is Mike Gervais, and I'm here with, I think it is Dr. Leslie Sherlin. Am I right?
That's right. That's right.
Doc, thank you. I know you are extremely busy. You've got several of your own companies. You're working with very high-end clients, and I know you don't have a lot of time. So I appreciate you making the time to do this interview. It means a lot.
No, I'm excited to have the opportunity to share, and you've got a great community.
So before we really get into it, can you explain to everyone a little, like maybe what is your title and a little bit about your educational background?
Yeah, so I currently have many titles, so we'll focus on my primary job is I am the Chief Executive and Chief Science Officer at a company called SenseLabs. I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing there. If it'll be a natural progression. If we start with my background was in psychology. I had studied a wide range of things. Predominantly, when I first entered college, I was a musician and was really good, but wasn't the best. And like many other types of performing arts or performance-based professions, including athletics, if you're not one of the elite best, then there's little room for you to make a living at it. So,
and what were you playing?
At the time, trumpet.
Trumpet, nice.
Nobody wants to hear you play that unless you're in the orchestra. So it wasn't even something that I could sit around the campfire and enjoy it. So.
Right.
So after I realized that there was something different about a lot of these guys and ladies than me, they were putting in less effort than I was and excelling to new levels where I seem to struggle, which I think many people experience in their life at some different aspect. It just was obvious to me that, one, that wasn't my profession, but also it became very interesting to me, like, why did I look the same, behave the same, and yet get different results than those individuals? So I had a little bit of a question that stuck in the back of my mind. And then I went through a variety of exploring different opportunities at the university. And finally, they said, you have to graduate. And so I said, well, I haven't tried psychology yet, so let's look there. And then really found an interest in that, began to answer that question of why do people do what they do, why are they different, and how can we explain it from a biological as well as a psychological way. So anyway, that led down a path of experimental and clinical psychology in my master's program, and then finally finished a PhD in psychology, only to later go back and do a re-specialization in sports psychology. I got the opportunity to start working with some athletes and realized that there's a whole other culture, another way of thinking about things when we start focusing in performance in sport than the average individual. So that was the academic piece, but all along that way, I was particularly interested in the way that the brain contributes to the way that we think, feel, and behave. and the brain makes electricity, and those electrical patterns have been demonstrated to change depending on the characteristics that the individual possesses, but also the state that we're in, meaning if you're drowsy, your electrical signature looks different than if you're focused, looks different if you're concentrating, and so on and so forth. So I started doing research and both while in school and then post school and into a profession of how does that electrical pattern of our brain represent who we are. And what's most exciting about it is once that we identify a particular characteristic, we can condition or change that electrical pattern or the way our brain behaves, and then that has a positive impact on our outward manifestation of the way that we think or feel or behave.
Wow, that's a lot. So
it's a lot.
That is phenomenal. So many questions come up off of that, but let's take it one by one. Can you explain? And so the way that the reason that we're here is I was doing the interview with Michael Gervais, and if you haven't listened to that, guys, anybody that's listening to this, if you haven't listened to that one, please go and check that out. That was a phenomenal interview with the sports psychologist of the Seahawks. But in the middle of the interview, he brought up the term brain mapping, and he said, I'll tell you a little bit about brain mapping, but you should really go talk to Leslie Sherlin. And here we are. So can you explain in a little more depth about those electrical signals and the concept that is brain mapping?
Yeah, so it's a pretty straightforward notion. Brain mapping means a whole bunch of things in our current science culture. They, from fMRIs, which are looking at the structural differences or the structure of our brain. There's functional MRI, so it's looking at blood oxygen consumption. But when we speak about brain mapping in this conversation, we're specifically referring to the electrical activity of the brain. And so by placing electrodes over the scalp, and this is there was a National Geographic that was very popular several years back. It's got a meditator on it. He's got just his entire face and head covered with electrodes. You can very easily Google to kind of get a visual representation of what we're talking about. But we place electrodes all along the scalp, and we are able to pick up the very tiny electrical signals that the brain is producing just naturally. So when to kind of boil it down to the most basic piece, we're all familiar that the brain is communicating both internally with neurons, and those neurons, as they're talking to each other, are releasing chemicals, and those chemicals basically create an electrical current. And that's what we're picking up with these little electrodes. Now, the part that's relevant to us and the part that's interesting is that as we start to do different things and our brain behaves in a different way, then that pattern shifts. And so brain mapping is recording that electrical activity and then quantifying it or counting how big is that waveform. So if we imagine just a wave behaves the same way as a sound wave, a light wave, all electrical waves, as the waves go up and down, they have different heights. And so we're measuring both how big are those waves, how fast do they go up and down, how long do they last, how do they interact, are they the same across many different areas, or are some areas operating in isolation and not very well connected to other areas of the brain. So what we're able to get from that, the information that we're extracting is to what degree is the brain engaged? To what degree is the brain activating when we ask it to do a task, and how well does it communicate with other areas of the brain? So different regions, how well are they connected? And that directly translates to how well we perform basic tasks, from being able to go to sleep at night and shut our brain off all the way up to solving complex problems and making fast decisions. So the mapping part of it is measuring that electrical activity and then visualizing it on a piece of paper so that one of us can look at it and go, oh, I see that you have a very busy brain, or if your brain's kind of slow, or it's not well connected in this particular area. And then we translate how that might contribute to a presentation.
So I I want to know how effective this is, and what my inclination is, or my assumption is that this is kind of like, if we're going to compare it to physical health, right? When people talk about supplementation, I say you shouldn't be taking any supplements until you can stick to a certain diet for, say, 90 days, right? There's no use in taking creatine, beta-alanine, arginine, et cetera, if you can't even stick to a normal diet. And that's just, again, my assumption. How maybe one way you can answer this is like, what's the most significant effect you've seen this brain mapping, have on an athlete?
So there's two pieces to it. I mean, first we make this brain mapping part of it, which is just, it's almost like I don't want to call it a diagnostic, but we can think about it in that way. Yeah. So it's an evaluation. We're taking a measurement of how the brain is performing, either in a resting task. We might have the person do some activation tasks, and we can just, it's purely an educational moment of, here's what it is. It's equivalent to taking a blood sample. Here's what's in the blood. Here's how it kind of maps out. Here's how the brain is performing. To then do something about it is the next step. And for some people, that's where it ends. I mean, we might do an evaluation. We say, here is, in fact, why you behave in the way that you do. And that's very insightful to some people. They're like, oh, I thought it was crazy, or I just thought it was something that was a quirk or something like that. But in reality, it's like, that's the way my brain is wired. And so they can develop behavioral strategies to deal with that. So we know that if my brain kind of gives out, it focuses very intensely, but does better in short durations, where another individual might have a lower level of intensity, but have a really long endurance. I mean, the same way that you might think about muscle fibers. So if we can adjust the way that we communicate to that individual in the locker room, or we're not going to watch 3 hours of film, we're going to look at 15-minute chunks and then digest it and go practice something. So there's that piece, which is in itself, the educational component's very valuable. But then there's this training.
I'm sorry to stop you real quick.
That's okay.
So
Go ahead.
Basically, you're getting objective feedback on, maybe as that example you just gave is like objective feedback on how someone learns best.
Exactly. So we're looking at, primary metrics of how does the brain manage stressors. So if I just throw a ton of stuff at you,
right, how
are you going to manage that? Within that is, if you make an error, what are you likely to do next? Some people make one mistake and then they're downhill from there. They just have a hard time recovering. Other people, it's like they never made the mistake. It's fresh. There is your intensity and capacity for engaging or focusing. We call it attention or focus a lot. That's kind of but it's that level of activation. How long can you sustain it? How intense can it be? What causes it to happen? Decision making. There's also, reaction speed and the ability to identify stimuli and respond to them. So there's a number of factors. Those are the primary ones that we're able to look at, and as it relates to performance, and say, all right, here's how each of those pieces contribute to your overall outcomes. So that's kind of that objective identification. So we understand now, here's how your brain's contributing to that performance.
Gotcha.
So if we want to do something about it from a physiological standpoint, then there is this intervention. And it's a really straightforward intervention. And I might add that although all the things we've talked up to this point, this brain map, that's incredibly reliable and incredibly valid. I mean, it's a test. I mean, it has been well established and is well accepted in the scientific community. The intervention, the next piece, is operant conditioning. So it's the same thing where basically if you're disciplining your child or you're teaching a new skill, you say, I want you to do something, you do it, and then we say, great job, you get the reward. That reinforces that particular behavior. We apply that back to the brain. So we identify those things that are strengths or potentially weaknesses out of that evaluation. And by monitoring that activity during real time, we can say, I want you to learn how to engage to a higher degree. We'll use as an example, I want you to focus more at the higher intensity. If your brain shifts in that direction, the electrical activity shifts in that direction, we give you a reward. We say, great job. We measured it. You did it. What did you do to succeed? And now let's replicate that. And that process is the feedback loop. So now we're training the brain to change the inherent way that it behaves, the way that it fires electrically, which in turn changes those chemical processes that we referenced. And so you're really completely organically changing the way that the brain behaves simply by bringing it into your conscious awareness.
Right. So back to my original question, what's maybe the one of your biggest, I don't know, transformations, if you will? I know you're working with the best of the best of the best, so it might still be very small, but tell us some of the most successful transformations on this.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many because, like you said, they're all it might be just a matter of inches or milliseconds that make the difference for somebody. So what's fascinating, I think the one thing that all the cases have in common is there is this moment where people realize that they're in control, and that's what's the exciting part for me, and I think for them too, is whether you're shaving seconds off your best time or whether you're adding, just increased intensity or endurance to your, mental stamina, so to speak. The moment where something happens and you go, this isn't the outcome that I want, I can change it. I don't feel focused. Okay, well, let me change that. I'm feeling overexcited or anxious or however we want to define that the butterflies. Let me change that. That moment where we realize we're in control, that's a profound moment that impacts all the individuals that I've gotten to work with. Some of the stories, I mean, to put it to paper, that one we can discuss, and people who are kind of outspoken about it. There was an athlete, a Red Bull athlete, Levi Lavalle, who had done an evaluation just for the educational piece, checking it out, and then sustained a very massive injury, which left him unconscious for a couple of days. He had significant challenges to overcome, and at that point started engaging in the training as well. And over the course of the next 6 to 7 months, he went from being really challenged both from memory and attention to not only being performing as well as he had before the accident, but had pushed even further. And so it went from a let's heal and recover to now let's focus on performance. Let's really take this to the next level. We've had, from every sport. There's been, just story after story where an individual is just wanting to learn how to push through a little bit further. Those are the big ones, who are, they're already at the top of their game, but just shaving milliseconds off of, or making one better decision in a fast-paced sport of basketball, or there's a video that we put together of Kyle Korver the year he was making more three-point shots than they're setting new records. And it was really for him just about finding, his words were, finding that sweet spot, that what he referenced as the zone, and the zone means many things to many people. So we could have a whole hour on that piece. But
there are literally many books written about that little space.
And they're not even always talking about the same thing,
right.
Interestingly enough. But that thing for him where he could just be in that moment of being just really executing and not focusing on all the distractions, not over analyzing it, just performing. And I think that's what ultimately most athletes, we spend so much time training our body to do something, and then when it gets time to do it, we can't get out of our head long enough to just let our body do what we've spent all those months and years training it to do. Right. That can be a real challenge. And that's the frustrating part for most athletes. So it's that moment of getting our head out of the way that makes the difference.
Right. And what hits me the hardest is what you're saying, that piece about learning that you're in control, because that seems to be the highest leverage piece in this whole discussion, where it not only affects your performance, but it also affects how you feel about your life, your relationships, all of that kind of stuff, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, the reason most people feel a lack of confidence, or they start to have self-doubt, or they get timid, particularly in athletics or other high stakes environments, is because they just don't feel like they're in control
Mm-hmm.
of some attribute. And it's usually, how are they going to respond to it? That's the part that they don't know. So if we can put that under the belt and say, look, even if I respond poorly on the first one, so I missed the first perfectly thrown pitch, so I didn't catch the perfectly thrown ball, all those kind of moments, I know that doesn't define me.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that changes our attitude, because now we're not timid. It's like, oh well, it was just a moment. Now let me go make a different moment happen.
Right. So I'm completely sold, and I think everybody listening to this is going to be completely sold on brain mapping and that kind of feedback. Do you have maybe 1 to 3 things that people can try that do not include sticking electrodes on their head, that they can try to start gaining control over their thoughts?
Yeah, the first and probably the easiest, and we always start here, no matter what level of athlete it is, whether it's a t-ball, sixth grader, all the way up to a professional. The first thing we're going to do is focus on our breath and regulating, just drawing our attention to calming our breath, and then learning to breathe slowly is a big deal. So it's putting that physiological piece into our conscious awareness. So that's the first piece, is just taking 2 to 3 minutes out of your day. Doesn't even have to be a consistent 3 minutes, but 30 seconds here, a minute there, just to close our eyes for a second, focus on breathing in and breathing out, and breathing in and breathing out. That is the first and probably one of the most effective things that people can do to just kind of calm the nervous system down, get the brain going in a particular direction. There's a lot
Can
of reasons why, but
Can we
we'll leave
actually?
those.
So, Leslie, I've asked, I think, 4 or 5 different people that same question, and we get the same exact answer. So
Oh, really?
I hope this is
That's great.
sinking into people's brains by now. But what we haven't talked about yet is why that is so effective.
Okay.
Can you maybe explain some of that?
Yeah, totally. The first piece is, generally speaking, when we get distracted, when we're busy on our life, busy on answering our emails or doing our job, or in the gym, wherever we are, our brain gets excited. And it's a big deal for us to be in a competition. We've invested a lot in this. And so our autonomic nervous system, the part of our brain and our body that regulates breathing, heart rate, excitatory, the fight or flight response, the way we respond to fearful or intimidating stimuli, gets excited, and it makes us want to get out of there. And so the breath increases, the heart rate increases, and then the brain responds going, wow, the body thinks this is a really big deal. We should probably get excited about it. And so the brain gets excited. And then the body says, oh my gosh, even the brain's getting excited about this. We should escalate. And so you have this constant loop of escalation, which we generally call stress or anxiety when we're talking about it. But this loop of everything just getting more tense, more excited, more amped up, and our performance begins to diminish. The way to break that cycle, the breath is the thing that we have in our control, and is the most primal piece of that autonomic nervous system. So by taking very long, deep breaths, that counteracts the autonomic nervous system continuing to wind up. Because the first thing we do when we get anxious is we start breathing very shallow and very quickly. And if you pay attention to the way your body responds, you see something startling, the first thing you do is you take a big breath in and you hold it. Well, and then it's that moment of, do I run or do I not run? Do I flee? So by continuing to control our breath, it's overriding our body's instinct of fight or flight and saying, I've got this. And then as it begins to calm down, our brain, our natural way of making decisions, becomes less negatively impacted. So we can think through decisions. We can actually execute things. When the autonomic nervous system is in charge, so to speak, it's moment by moment, and it's not based on what's smart. It's based on what will get me out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a whole, if anybody's interested in looking up, there's a thing called vagal tone, Vagal, and that's basically there's a vagus nerve, and that's this giant bundle that is connecting our autonomic and central nervous system together, and having increased vagal tone allows us to be more in control of these types of things. So, um, largely enough, it's fight or flight response, and the breath breaks that cycle of the fight or flight response.
And then, so how does this relate to the brain waves and what you're tracking?
So our brain responds to that increased excitation by literally producing more fast frequency activity. Some areas of the brain, I don't want to give the misrepresentation when I say they shut down. It's not like they turn off. We allocate the resources somewhere else. The analogy I like to use is, within your family or your work group, there might be one person who handles pressure really well. And if things get really exciting, you say, you make the decision because I'm going to not do a very good job of it. That's kind of what happens in the brain. It's like, wait, this is a high stakes environment. My frontal lobe, the one that kind of plans things out and organizes, I'm out of here. This isn't for me. I want some other area to take over. So we see some areas becoming disengaged from the network because it's important in those moments where our body thinks we're in danger to escape. It doesn't need a committee meeting. It needs one person to
Right.
execute and decide what to do. And so some areas of the brain become, isolated, so to speak, or disengaged from the network. So we can see that start to happen. And then what we can do through the training is say, all right, we're going to put you in an environment where we're going to ask you to make decisions very quickly. We're going to do, even silly things like, you have to identify a target and a non-target, just like a picture. This one, press the button when you see this one. Don't press the button when you see a different one. But I want to go really fast, and we're going to count the points. And putting people under that pressure and teaching their brain to remain, as a network, connected and everything functioning all at the same time. While doing that, that practice is, oh, okay, now that whole piece gets to be a better machine.
Mm-hmm.
It works better together just by practicing it. So when we get in that high stakes moment, when the stimuli are coming really quickly, parts of the brain don't start to isolate. They say, all right, I'm still in it. I practiced this. I can do it.
Right. So we talked about the physiological component of the breath, as well as I guess we would call that the neurological. Can you talk about, and you mentioned this word, and I kind of want to introduce this to our listeners. Can you talk about the term consciousness and how that's related to the breath?
Yeah, so consciousness is basically, in the context that we're thinking about it here, is simply those things that are in our awareness. So right now, unless we are monitoring our heart rate, it is out of our conscious awareness. So until I said the heart rate, nobody was counting their heartbeats. Nobody was noticing whether how fast or how slow. But then when we say, I wonder what my heart rate is, now our attention has turned to it, and we can either feel it, or we can place our hand somewhere on our body or take a stethoscope or something and measure our heart rate. So that put it into our conscious awareness. Things like our anything that's not in our mind at the moment, we're not attending to, we're not giving it any thought, is in our unconscious, or we're not being consciously aware of it. And the more things that we can bring into our conscious awareness, so know that it's existing, and then do something about, train it, condition it, work with that, and then kind of put it back to bed, so to speak, that it's going to do its thing. And that's what we're doing. Really, it's very easy to think about this in a physical training regimen. When you're doing particular motions, or you're doing particular strength and conditioning types of exercises, you're bringing a muscle group or a particular biomechanical movement into your conscious awareness, and you're really focusing on it, and you're managing the motion, how my foot strike is going to be, or whatever, my golf swing, or fill in the blank. And then you're really training those pieces. And then after you've worked it and you've trained it enough, we often call that muscle memory, but after you've trained it enough to fire in a particular way, now you can kind of put it back to bed, so to speak. You don't have to hold it in your conscious awareness because you've mastered that piece.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about it is we have a very limited amount of things that we can hold in our conscious awareness, and that's why, novice, aspiring to be good athletes, or you can apply this to corporate situations, whatever you like. We can't hold all those things in our mind, and so we step up to the batter box, or we step up to the plate, or to the board meeting, or the competition, and we're trying to remember everything it is
Right.
that we're supposed to be doing, and we can't. And so that's where we start to fail. So we want to bring things into conscious awareness, address them, train them, and then kind of put it back to bed.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, for a beginner who has all of those things, they can't really hold the entire, say, cup of water all at once, and the water is everything that they're trying to remember. What is the best strategy for a beginner to intermediate when they go to perform? Is it similar to the expert in which you would just want to remain present and just focus on the task at hand, or what?
So yeah, definitely. I mean, in any case, no matter where you are on the spectrum of performing, being in the moment is key. It's hard. I mean, that's easy for us to say, be in the moment, and people either don't know what that means, or if they do, they go, yeah, it's just not that easy, because we do want to think about all those pieces. But being in the moment is essential. And the way to be in the moment, if you are, if you haven't mastered a particular thing, and really you have to get to mastery before you can start putting some of these things out of your mind and just executing,
Right.
is deciding, what will I hold in my mind while I'm doing this? So there's some things, when I go to the golf course, as an example, keeping the ball on the course isn't in my mind because I can't hold that. I'm not a good golfer. I just want to, make contact with the ball. So,
Right.
we have baby steps, kind of a thing. So, in seriousness, you just can't think the entire competition through. Don't worry about the finals. Worry about the one that you're in, and you make it there. If you're not, if you're uncomfortable with 10 things, just resolve that, 6 of them are just going to happen. You've trained to this point, they're going to be what they're going to be. And whatever you're doing at this moment isn't going to change them. And try to focus on just a few things. So narrowing it down is what we can really try to do as we're aspiring to get better.
Why do you think people try to hold all of that in their head at once? Is it a fear of failure, or is it something else?
Well, you've heard the expression, enough, I know just enough to be dangerous. It's that when we're ignorance is bliss, it comes to mind too. When we don't know what we don't know, it's no big deal. And that we often chalk that up to beginner's luck. Every time, somebody goes out and they try something, do a pretty good job, they go, hey, maybe I've got a chance at this. And then they realize that sport or that thing isn't that easy when they start to understand all the pieces in it. It's just natural for us to, once we start to realize and give respect to the thing that we are doing, that it's complicated and it's hard, and that the people who are at the top of their game have dedicated a lot of effort, both physical and mental, to being at that place. And so we start to say, okay, how can I measure up? How does that expert do it? Or how can I, that we know our weaknesses better than anybody else. And so we tend to start focusing on those things and go, well, I'm not good at this, and I'm not going to be executing in all these different ways. And we have that in mind because we have either a fear or an excitement, an anxiety around how will we do it this time. And there's that inconsistency. I mean, there's a lot of, they're all negative kind of words that come into mind, and they start kind of messing with our ability. And that's why that being present in the moment is so important, because we go, look, who I am right now is how I'm going to perform. And if I'm not the best in the category, then that's fine. I'm going to go compete at my best. And so we start focusing on outcomes rather than the process. And then that's where we start getting ourselves into big troubles.
Right. So by focusing on the outcome, we actually get usually an inferior outcome.
That's right.
So I want to one more follow up, and then we'll move on from this topic.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything other than the breath that you teach people that does not include the electrodes?
Yeah, I mean, there's, the traditional types of, mental skill training. There's visualization techniques that are very important. We have to be able to see ourselves succeeding. And an interesting point about that, while studying brainwaves of individuals, your brain responds electrically and behaviorally very similarly, whether you are visualizing the task or whether you're actually doing the task. So spending time, on a plane ride or in the office or wherever it is, taking 30 seconds, a minute, and visualizing that performance, perfect performance, is helpful to our executing a perfect performance at a future time point. So visualization is a big deal. Making sure that we kind of do, goal setting and getting the right frame of reference. Are we focusing on the right things or not? Those types of more traditional mental skills kinds of things that you might talk to your coaches and trainers about. As far as practical things, doing, being mindful and breathing and just focusing on those are the big ones.
Love it, man. Let's talk about neuroplasticity. Is there,
Okay.
and can you maybe define neuroplasticity? And also, is there anything that we humans cannot learn and get better at in terms of mental performance?
Wow, that's a big question. Yeah, so neuroplasticity basically is this idea that we can recreate or make new pathways or create new pathways in our brain, and that the neurology, the neurons and all the components of our central nervous system aren't static, that they can be molded and changed either by changing the network, changing the way that it communicates, or by in fact creating new pathways and new processes. So neuroplasticity is a big word that just simply means our brain and central nervous system are dynamic, and by doing the right things, we can influence its capacity or potential to optimally perform. And the second piece is huge. Trying to think how to put it into smaller.
Please take your time on that one.
Yeah. So, what was our question? How did you phrase it?
Is there anything that we cannot learn and improve on?
No, I don't think so. Nothing comes to mind. I'm sure that we all have some limitations in some categories. Like I know that and there are certain things that you just simply. I take it back. I don't know if we're incapable, literally speaking, or if we just decide it's not worth the effort to do it. I'm going to say I can't think of anything outside of when an individual has a pathological or organic damage that would cause them, and even then we see miraculous kinds of people overcome amazing things. So no, I think I'm going to go with no. I can't think of a thing that is completely outside of our capacity. One of the things that's exciting is we don't know what the maximum potential is. So, an athlete comes in and we'll do an evaluation. So we'll do a brain mapping and we'll talk about possible ways to improve. And they'll say, how good can I get? The answer is, I don't know. I've not seen anybody kind of top out and be like, oh, well, I've achieved as good as I'm going to be. This is it. There's always this moment for improvement, and the outcome may not be drastic. I mean, we literally might be talking about, saving one shot per 3 rounds of golf, or shaving off 1 second, or even less in something. But you don't know where that one decision that you made really impacts everything downstream. So I'm going to say I don't think there's anything we can't improve on. The degree to which we can improve it or grow can diminish after we get to a certain point, but I think there's always room.
Right. And again, I've probably talked about this a couple times, but it's just amazing to realize that we can change everything, even the way that we communicate with people, the way that we feel about ourselves, all of these things that have such an impact on every area of our life. It just gives you, it has to give you such confidence in your ability to be happy and fulfilled in life, which is really amazing.
Yeah, and that moment of saying that is completely in my control.
Right.
If you don't like the way your situation is, that's okay. Change
Right.
it. And you have that capacity. You may not have all the tools or the skills, but those tools and skills are out there. We
Right.
just have to find, say, you know, I could not be a champion athlete and pick a variety of domains, but with the right coaching, with the right conditioning, with the right effort put into it, I could be a competitor.
Right.
We all could be a competitor. So we need to, knowing that is kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm. So so you sell the Versus headset, right?
That's right. So the company that I'm started 6 years ago and am currently running is SenseLabs, and that the primary job of SenseLabs was, we started working with a lot of athletes in our office, and it's just an inconvenience to get into an office to see somebody a couple of times a week doing this training. So we wanted to make it more accessible and also kind of more affordable than the traditional implementation. So we created the Versus.
And so obviously I looked them up. I'm trying to get my own Versus headset and they're sold out. When are you going to get some more of them?
Yeah, we hope to start building more actually in the next 30 days. We had,
Thank God.
Yeah, it was our first production run, and we didn't know what the reaction was going to be from the community at large. Like, we had created enough hand built to know that our Uber athletes, the real professionals who were really wanting to take that extra step, they were interested, but we didn't know what the larger audience would be interested in. So we made just over 1,000 and said, all right, we'll let it out into the wild and see how people, what the benefits will be, what they find. And it was a massive response. So yeah, now we're taking all the feedback and making some improvements and putting it back out. Hopefully this fall we'll have some more in existence.
Hell yeah. I'm gonna be looking out for that pre-order for sure.
Okay, very good. Very good.
Oh man. Let's talk about just a couple more things and then we'll wrap it up. I want to talk about sleep, and I know you're I think that your Sleep Sense is a part of the same organization. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So before we talk about that exactly, can you explain a little bit about the current science of sleep? Like, what does sleep have to do with recovery in an abbreviated form, as well as what is the kind of current prescription of sleep for athletes?
Yeah, so it's a big topic. We know a lot, but we don't know as much as we probably should. And the recovery is such a huge topic. In fact, most organizations that we work with or get introduced or talk to, recovery and sleep is the number one topic, even more than strength or creating increased endurance or even execution and skills. It's about sleep and recovery. And so we know that when we are not having a full sleep cycle, that we're not hitting all of the stages of sleep, and that there is not enough quantity or quality of sleep, and those kind of correlate together, that there is diminished returns both on our ability to perform, but also during our ability to recovery. So unless we are in our deeper stages of sleep, there's chemical reactions, there's physical things that are happening, human growth hormones, certain hormone production, which all restores and rebuilds muscles that have been broken down. It's the same for the brain, neurons, the growth and that neuroplasticity that we talked about is dependent on us having proper sleep as well. Mm-hmm. So if we start to either cut down on the amount of sleep that we're having, or if we diminish the quality of that sleep, either from a sleep disorder, an apnea, or just interrupted sleep patterns, whatever the cause might be, then we're going to have diminished ability to grow and recover. But even bigger than that, we're going to have diminished performances in our awake stages. So it's a big deal. Those things are probably outside of the usual of nutrition and strength and conditioning
Hmm.
itself. Sleep is, I see those as the big three,
Right.
strength conditioning, actually working on the body, nutrition, and then sleep.
I love it. And so, what is the current prescription for optimal sleep? And I'm talking about, I don't know, sheets, temperature, lighting, supplementation, all of that kind of stuff. What's the optimal way to sleep?
It really depends on the individual. We know that, generally speaking, cooler temperatures are better. There's some research, not a huge amount, that's talking about a temperature in the mid 60s as being more conducive, but for some people that just simply is uncomfortable. So I think, the prescription should be that there's some general guidelines, whether we're talking about temperature or what nutritional supplementation you might do. I mean, obviously having the right foods, and I'm not a nutritionist, so I'll stay far away from making recommendations, but it has to be addressed, and exercise being a part of it, but then you can overexert. So there's, making sure that all those pieces are kind of lined up, um, have an influence on optimizing that sleep. But there's individual nuances within that. And for some people, we just was doing an interview and a write-up a couple of months ago about, is 8 hours or 10 hours or is it 6 hours the right number? And the number depends on the individual. And the heavier we are, hitting ourselves from a physical demand. So if we're in a heavy training season, high intensity, then we're going to need more recovery. So kind of imagining, like duration or the amount of sleep needed to offset the amount of effort that we're putting into our awake states. So that's kind of a decent correlation, and everybody has an individual number. But when we kind of figure that out, we can try it by trial and error. Simply, let's try and go to bed earlier and get 7 hours. Let's try and get 8 hours. Let's try to do 9 hours for a period of time. See what happens, and ultimately, the individual. There's a little bit of trial and error, but there are some basic guidelines around each of those different domains.
So, at the very least, it makes sense to maybe make an experiment out of yourself and figure out what your optimal sleep is.
Yeah.
If you want to perform at your best, then you have to
Mhm.
experiment and find out what is best.
And people probably know. I mean, if you go to bed at a reasonable time, well, it doesn't even matter. Going to bed, it is helpful to go and try and sleep during night hours, the darkness.
Hmm.
And so if we generally align our sleep cycle with darkness and waking up with when the sun comes out, and just if we were to let our body do its thing, we went to bed, we didn't have an alarm, we didn't have the television on when we went to sleep, we didn't
Hmm.
have our phone and all those kinds of distractions. If we just went to sleep and woke up and we did that for a period of 14 to 20 days, by the time we got to the end, our body would be largely regulated to the extent of telling us how much sleep it needs.
Wow. I love that. I'm going to have to try that out.
Yeah, basically, when it starts getting dark, turn your TV and phone and say, all right, I'm done for the day.
Hmm.
And, spend some time either reading or doing something else, and then just close the light, turn the lights out. We might be laying there for a while, just
Hmm.
waiting for this magical thing to happen. But, it'll start to regulate and balance out. In a couple of weeks' time, you'll be going to bed and waking up naturally at whatever duration your body needs.
Right. Wow. Fascinating.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about sleep sense.
Yeah, so the basic concept is that, again, putting something into our conscious awareness, and because sleep is
Leslie,
such
can
an
I stop you
integral
real
part,
quick? Real
please.
quick. This is correct me if I'm wrong. It's an app that you can download on your
That's right.
phone, correct?
That's right.
And it's
That's right.
part of
Yeah.
your
So,
company. Yeah, it's part of your company. Now go.
yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. No, it's okay. Yeah. So SenseLabs made an app for sleep called Sense Sleep, and you could download it out of the iTunes store. It's available now. It's free. You basically simply track your sleep by rating how good of sleep you had, you're rating it, and then before going to sleep, you're putting your finger over the camera sensor, and it's measuring your heartbeat. And so it's teaching you to do a breath pacing. So it's slowing that breath down. So it's actually a great tool if you're looking to take the first steps at the breath work that we talked about, but you're not sure how to do it or what to do. This is a great app for that as well. You can download it. It's just a breath pacer. It takes you through 3 minutes of breathing, calm, focusing on that, watching your heart rate decrease, and then you put it down and get in bed. But you can do it at any time during the day, just to kind of manage that arousal level. And the idea is, again, around just putting something into our conscious awareness that if we're thinking about managing our breath, calming down, preparing ourselves, and our body and our brain are very ritualistic. So if we're doing this before bed, it's telling our body, our systems, okay, this is the thing to do. So having routines and, quote, bedtime rituals are very helpful to help us transition into that sleep state. And that's kind of the intended purpose.
I love that. I've gotten in finally, after years of trying different things for a morning ritual, I've finally gotten into like this really solid, the kind of 90-minute morning ritual, and it's transformed my entire life. And so I've started to journal a little bit and stuff like that at night. And so I'm gonna add this in. I'm excited.
Yeah, so put that at the very end, do your journal, and then just put in this breathing exercise and see what it does. It's so interesting to me. It's so simple to do, and the feedback that we get are really amazing about what a big difference just doing something so simple for 3 minutes a day, how transformative it can be. So you're on the right path of creating those rituals and kind of doing this regimen. I mean, it brings us up to speed and then takes us down, and then we're prepared. We're better prepared in the middle of the day because you're also taking that time for you and being in that moment. So your morning ritual is like, okay, here I am. You're setting your tone. It's a lot of good stuff about doing that. You should make sure, and at some point, if you haven't, for your listeners, elaborate on what you do and help them get some routine set up, because that is a really valuable thing to do.
I will. Thank you. Two more questions and we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
On productivity. So I read an interview somewhere on the interwebs of you. It was kind of around you saying the word, quote unquote, done. And so how can we use the word done and utilize this concept that you're speaking about to be more productive?
So, if you haven't ever done this, I started to say everybody's made a checklist. Surely they've either packed to go on a trip, or they've made a to-do list because they had a lot of things to do, or maybe their significant other gave them a list of stuff they needed to do. But there's some value. There's a couple of reasons why this done works so well. In many things, and certainly speaking to athletes, this will resonate, of creating momentum. By saying done, you are doing two things. One, you're dismissing something else. So again, we can only hold so many things in awareness. By saying done, we're getting that one out. So there's one less thing that I even have to consider. It's done. It's just gone. It's now in the past. The second piece is that somehow is motivating. It's like, wow, okay, one down. What else can I achieve? Because inherently, all of us want to achieve something, and it feels good to have achieved. And so it's like, all right, I got 3 things off the list. Maybe I can go ahead and get another one knocked out. So there's this momentum shift of accomplishing things and becoming more productivity, or increasing our productivity. But there's also the moment of saying that thing is over. It's off the list. Even if we didn't, and this is where it can be challenging sometimes for people, is we didn't succeed or we didn't get it accomplished to the degree that we want. Sometimes we have to say, okay, do I reprioritize it into the list and it stays there? Or do I just say, that's as good as it's going to get, I'm done, and let it go? So it's about letting stuff go, getting it, we don't have to think about everything all at once. Let's just be in the moment we're in and put that thing in the past.
I love that. Thank you. I started creating a 3-item list every night for the next day, and then I'll just cross them off of a piece of paper the next day as I
Uh-huh.
complete them. Those are my most important tasks. And like you're saying, it's the most amazing feeling, and the simplest of things make you feel confident, and everything for the rest of the day becomes a little bit easier because of that confidence.
That's right. And so I would encourage people when they're doing this to put everything on the list, even if it's small. I mean, you don't have to brush your teeth on there necessarily, but like all the little tasks that we have to do, pay my bills, check my email, whatever, put it on there
Right.
and mark it off. There's real value in just being, and then say to ourselves, either mentally or even out loud, done. I mean, it's amazing how good that word sounds and feels.
That's awesome. Last question. You are incredibly successful in so many different domains. Your career, you're as an entrepreneur, as a psychologist, you have all of these different aspects of your life. How do you balance being that entrepreneur, scientist, etc., and how do you prioritize? How do you say this takes priority over this? Do you have any rules that you set for yourself?
I think it's a good question. So one of the things that I keep in mind when I get distracted or I'm disoriented about which of these things to do, I mean, there's immediate triage of, this thing has to happen now or else it's going to negatively impact something. That's important to be able to triage well. But second to that, it's about determining what's important to you and what your goals are. So, what is your value system? Is family most important? Is my religion most important? Is it work? What is my real value system? What are my priorities? And then reminding ourselves if we get confused or we have competing interests, is what I'm doing right now getting me closer to that goal? If the answer is yes, then great. We're on path. If it's not, then we have to evaluate what's the value in what I'm doing right now. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have value if it's not pushing us toward a particular goal, personal time. But again, if our value system is around, family or self-development or whatever it is, increasing our wealth or whatever, then answering that simple question is what I'm doing right now, getting me closer to that.
Right.
Helps decide where I should be applying my time.
That is great. Thank you, man. All right. Where can people maybe keep up with you on social media or online, what have you?
Yeah, so I have a personal website, lesliesherlin.com. It's LESLIESHERLIN.com. I maintain a Facebook page, Leslie.Sherlin, or it's facebook.com, Leslie.Sherlin, Twitter, @LeslieSherlin. You can just do a little Google and you can find far more than you ever want. So you can take on as much or as little as you like there.
What do you want people to be aware of that you have on the horizon coming up? Anything?
Yeah, there's some exciting developments coming up in the technology space. SenseLabs is doing some really exciting things. I think that'll be a big deal, both continued work in sleep, but also in performance. And so just making more accessible tools, that's exciting. Yeah, that's the big deal. I mean, I think, I really want to focus on getting better tools in people's hands so that it makes the opportunity to do these types of things that we're talking about more tangible, because I think people want to do them, they just don't know what to do. So making it more tangible, making it less invasive to our life, and really maximizing our time that we spend on these things. So that's kind of that's where the exciting stuff will be.
Hell yeah! Do y'all have a waiting list or anything like that on the Versus headsets?
Yeah, exactly. So if you go to getversus.com, I think there is I can't remember which subpage it's on, but there is a back order page, and you can sign up there to be on the list, get on the mailing list, and we'll let you know when release comes out. And it should be this fall, so with some improvements too. So that's even better.
Hell yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been fun.